Hello, friends, and welcome to the Ponderosa High School Introduction to Drawing class. I'm your host, Robert Chambers. Today, we are going to draw our second archetypal shape. This is what we did in the last video. We did our cube. So now we're going to focus on our cone. So let's jump right in, shall we? So the cone is just an ellipse. And then that short axis, that's right in the middle, so just kind of draw that, follow that up with a little construction line, and then draw the sides of the cone all the way down to the edges of the ellipse. And that's it. Let's try a really narrow one. Okay, so that's how you do a cone. Pretty straightforward, pretty easy. Not as complicated as the cube. So because it's not as complicated, I think we'll start with the cone, we'll start with our shadows. Because each one of these shapes has its own shadow. If you can draw the shape and then draw the shadow that goes with it, boy, that just goes such a long way towards being able to draw anything you want. So this cone, you want to just think about where your light source is from. Just use an arrow, light's coming like this. And maybe it's hitting the cone. Just draw a line from the top down to somewhere, like not right down the middle, but just off to one side. And then draw a line through the middle of the ellipse, then up the other side. And that'll give you an idea of where the shadow is falling on the other side as well. And so then you just go down here, and we're going to pull the edges of the shadows off of there, and they're going to kind of meet. This is going to be perpendicular, but this line I'm coming off of here, it's going to be perpendicular, but in perspective, so it's going to be coming down just a little bit. It's not going to be going straight out. So draw that line out a little bit, maybe a little bit longer than the cone is tall, and then connect up those sides with the tip. Sharpshooter. Yep. Okay, and now we're going to do our parallel lines. Okay. These parallel lines are going to get more difficult as you go down, but hopefully you've been practicing, so this shouldn't be too difficult. Okay, those are our parallel lines. So now this is in the light, this is in the shadow. And now we're going to do more parallel lines. For the shadow, I'm just going to turn the parallel lines a little bit just so they don't interfere too much with the lines that we drew on the cone itself. Now we're going to do a crosshatch. Crosshatch is you do 45 strokes, or you do your parallel lines, and then you turn perpendicular. And that's a crosshatch right there. And it's a way to make a really nicely controlled value, like a light and a dark. Like this is a dark, and we're controlling it with the pen, because the pen it's really hard if you're going to start kind of trying to color it in like you would with a crayon or a marker. Even if you go, even if you're kind of controlled with it, it still ends up looking really noisy. There's lots of light in there, and you overlap, and it just looks a little disorganized. And sometimes you want that. But when we're doing these controlled drawings, we want to try to control our light as much as possible. So we're going to do a little crosshatch right here. And then I'm going to show you this artist named Joe Sacco, who is a journalist and an illustrator. You never really see that. It used to be, I think, before photography, people would draw pictures of news. And he's the one, he still does that. Let me show you here. Oh, Joe Sacco. This guy is amazing. This is one of the books that he did called Palestine. He went to Palestine. He visited people. He interviewed them. He walked around. He took pictures, and then he did just a ton of drawing. He did a ton of drawings, and a lot of his drawings are just these crosshatches, triple crosshatches. And this is just him and his experiences in the West Bank in Palestine. And there's just some really amazing drawings in here. And it's journalism. This happened to him. It's really amazing because the drawings can be so personal, and you can really, with the photograph, there's a lot of stuff that you might not really want to have in there. And with a drawing, you can really choose what you want to convey to people. Look at that. This is what it looks like in one of the camps in the West Bank. Looks very muddy, wet, cold, barricades, and it just looks like people are trying to eke out their living in a bit of a war zone, in a miserable situation. Lots of cross-hatching though. Joe Sacco does a lot of parallel lines. If you ever want to do an interesting Google search, look up Joe Sacco and just take a look at his parallel lines. This is all hand-drawn, but look at his parallel lines and you'll be amazed, because he does a lot of them. Every drawing seems to have just tons of parallel lines. Anyway, Joe Sacco, great illustrator, someone to be aware of. Okay, so and this, just a general rule of thumb. It doesn't always hold, but just depends on the light. Like when we talk about shadows and the anatomy of shadows, like how shadows are built. Generally speaking, the shadow that is cast by an object is a little bit darker than the dark part that's on the actual object. So that's why that kind of looks right, And there you go. So for your assignment today, draw some cones and try to do this cross-hatching. Experiment with cross-hatching. What you can do also is, draw some cones. There's your sheet of paper. Do your parallel lines. Do your sharpshooter. Do your astral navigation. And then draw some cones down here. And put the shadow in. Try drawing the cone at different angles. Putting the shadow in, like that one's kind of looking down on that cone. And experiment with different crosshatches. We're going to do shadows for all of those shapes, and so maybe try just taking a rectangle, make a rectangle, and do a set of parallel lines through the rectangle. As you're doing this, try to cross over just a little bit. Like crossing over the line above and below is better than not touching it at all. It's a bit like the follow through of the stroke of the pen. So that's okay if you go outside the line there. It's okay. You're supposed to. So do that one and then cross hatch it. Sorry about all the shadows here. I'm really working on the lighting situation in my recording studio. I need a roadie or a grip or best boy. I don't know, one of those people in the credits come and help figure this out for me. So do the cross hatching and then do the triple hatch. Now you can like overlay another set of parallel lines. Seriously, do a Google image search on Joe Sacco and just look at his lines. They're amazing. Maybe go 3/4 of the way, and then over here and do the other parallel lines. You can see that you can start to really control light and dark. So draw some cones, practice some cross hatching, do the other sprints and exercises, and we'll see you back here for the next video when we do our next shape, which will be, let's do the sphere. let's tackle the hard one before we get to the cylinder. Okay, so until then, what kind of pen you guys using? I'm still using the ballpoint razor point, the Pilot razor point. I'm still using the Pilot razor point, though I did get one of these guys, which is the Pilot razor point 2, and it's a little juicy. The nib is a little thinner. It's a little intimidating. Like it's hard to make a really light construction line with this one. So I'm not quite ready for that one. I might have to use it for something and pull a little bit of the ink out of it. I'm still pretty happy with these ones. Pilot razor point. Okay, so now I'm going to sign off because I'm talking about pens, and that's something that we should not do. Okay.